Originally featured in the May 2003 issue of Guitar World, guitarist Brad Delson and rapper Pro Tools expert Mike Shinoda explain how taking care of business and working overtime helped Linkin Park craft Meteora, their ambitious new album. The Late Shift by Alan D. Perna. Linkin Park's North Hollywood rehearsal space is a hive of bustling activity. Roadies dart to and fro with crisp professionalism. A CNN film crew sets up cameras and microphones. Band members wander the corridors with cell phones glued to their ears, doing press interviews and clinching business deals. Amid all the hubbub, Linkin Park's resident rapper and computer whiz Mike Shinoda cleans out his wardrobe locker, a narrow cubicle housed in a heavily armored road case that also contains neatly labeled slots for all the other band members. Shinoda uses his space to store gifts that he receives from adoring fans on the road. There are cartoon drawings of him and little handmade dolls fashioned in his likeness. It's kind of cute, but also a little creepy. A reminder that Linkin Park's 8 times platinum debut album, Hybrid Theory, has garnered the band a teen girl following of the sort usually associated more with boy bands than with rap metal outfits. Everyone in the rehearsal space is busy with preparations to promote Linkin Park's new album, Meteora. The band will be hitting the road in support of the album, both as headliners and as part of Metallica's Summer Sanitarium tour, a sweltering metal fest that will also feature Limp Bizkit, the Deftones, and Mudvayne. Expectations for Meteora are riding high. It is Linkin Park's first real album in 3 years, which is a long stretch in the world of mega platinum music sales. The band bought itself a little extra time by releasing 2002's Reanimation, a collection of remixes and songs from Hybrid Theory. But now they've got a brand new studio album to unleash. Sounding a little like a hockey player giving a post-game interview, guitarist Brad Delson declares himself proud and passionate when it comes to Meteora. He goes on to explain the origin of the album's sci-fi sounding title. We were touring in Europe and our bus driver had this travel magazine in the front lounge, and there was a full spread on a place called Meteora. It's this place in Greece, a string of rock formations with monasteries on top of them. They're constructed in the most inconceivable way. How do you even get up there, much less build a monastery? So on one level, the title of Meteora has nothing to do with our music, but on the other hand, it's a metaphor. We said, man, as grand and epic as this place is visually, let's try to create the same thing sonically. Let's create an epic record. That they've done. Meteora's 13-song revel in Linkin Park's highly tweaked signature blend of nu metal, hip-hop, and synth-poppy electronica. But they've upped the ante by adding strings and grand piano, the latter courtesy of Shinoda, who's been taking piano lessons since boyhood. Shinoda and DJ Joe Han have also outdone themselves when it comes to samples and loops. From Japanese flutes to distressed gamelan-like percussion, there's hardly a track that doesn't begin with some beguiling sonic fill-up to help draw the listener in. Backward guitar loops lead the way into the album's first single, Somewhere I Belong. From there, Shinoda's rap ballad verses alternate with catchy choruses that showcase singer Chester Bennington's knack for crafting melodies and chord progressions more than slightly reminiscent of Depeche Mode. It might not seem possible, but Meteora is more obsessively crafted than Hybrid Theory or Reanimation. We spent a significant amount of time in the studio compared to last time, says Delson. I think we probably spent as much time on vocals as we did for the whole prior album. After selling 8 million copies of their debut album, Linkin Park were definitely feeling some pressure as they set to work on Meteora. We were very stressed out throughout the whole process, Delson admits, or at least I was. I'm not the type of person who thinks, oh, this is going to be great. I'm the type of person who says, unless we bust our asses, this is going to suck. Sonically ambitious as it is, Meteora is still solidly grounded in Delson's thunder and maelstrom, down-tuned guitars which thud and pummel in precision lockstep with Rob Borden's propulsive drumming and bassist Phoenix's own brand of low-frequency mayhem. Like all of Linkin Park's instrumental passages, Delson's guitar parts are worked out in close collaboration with Shinoda and his computer. A lot of bands these days bring in a Pro Tool guy when working on an album, but Linkin Park are unique in having a Pro Tools expert as an actual band member. There's a high level of trust and communication between Delson and Shinoda, who have been friends since junior high school. As a result, Linkin Park have meshed electronics with metal guitar more seamlessly than perhaps any other group that has attempted this eminently marketable fusion. We're lucky to have Mike in the band, says Delson. He basically started out producing songs from his friends who are MCs, so he has always been great with samplers, keyboards, drum machines, and ultimately with programs like Cubase and Pro Tools. He uses the computer almost as an instrument in itself to create sounds you ordinarily couldn't play. It helps that Brad and I both have music training, Shinoda adds. I played piano for 10 years, so that's my first language. The guitar is my second language. I'm not as familiar with the terminology and everything, but I can play, and Brad can play a tiny bit of piano, but he knows his guitar theory really well, and he knows how to talk to me in that language. Teamwork is the key to all things that are Linkin Park. Shinoda and Han, who both studied at R Center College in Pasadena, California, oversee album art, videos, t-shirt design, and everything else that belongs to the band's visual image. Delson, who studied business at UCLA, works with Borden to look after the band's fiscal matters. We take care of the unglamorous stuff that needs to get done, says the guitarist. I think what makes our band so strong is that we're not just musicians, we all have other interests, whether it's the visual arts or working with different organizations, like different charities. But viewed in another light, that's precisely the problem with Linkin Park. Preppy overachievers. They tend to stick out like a sore thumb in the rap metal world of gangsters, outsiders, and dysfunctional F-ups. College educated and unabashedly middle class, the members of Linkin Park run their band like a well organized high school pep rally. They had a publishing deal before they were even signed to a record label, not to mention a street team, a network of fans recruited via internet and plied with free t-shirts, stickers, CDs, and other incentives to spread the Linkin Park gospel. The group's sole source of loser cred is Chester Bennington, who has a past history of drug dependency and claims to have been abused as a child. But apparently he's towing the line too these days. Alcohol is forbidden on the Linkin Park tour bus, and every man in the band claims he'd rather spend a night with a computer game than a groupie. Oh, we'll bore you to death, says Borden with a strange kind of pride. We don't have any throwing up all over the place stories, or any crazy party stories to tell you. So it's no surprise that hardcore metal fans have sometimes been reluctant to embrace the Linkin Park. But there are hopes that this summer's outing with Metallica will win some new converts. We're excited to be out with Metallica, says Borden. They're definitely a band that has influenced us, especially Brad, as a guitar player. And this tour is definitely a good thing for us because I think a lot of Metallica fans haven't really seen Linkin Park and don't know a lot about us. We come off as a really heavy band when you see us live. When we did Ozfest 2 summers ago, it was a great learning experience for us. A lot of the hardcore Aussie fans were in the front, biker dudes in leather jackets, and for the first few shows of the tour, it was kind of tough for us to get across to them. We were a little frustrated, but we found a way to overcome that, get everyone's attention, and play our show. And by the end of that tour, we had everyone totally into it. I think the great thing is that we can go and play with hip hop bands or play with a metal band all the way on the opposite end of the spectrum and appeal to both crowds. Meanwhile, back at the rehearsal hall, the cogs of Linkin Park's well-oiled touring machine were slipping into place as Brad Delson and Mike Shinoda took time to tell Guitar World about the making of Meteora. Guitar World. Is the band really as straight edge as the press would have one believe? No booze on the bus? All of that? Mike Shinoda. You know what? The press invented that more than we did, and that's only because it's such an odd thing to have in a band that tours a lot. On the road, you've got to let loose sometimes and have some fun, and we absolutely do that. We will occasionally go to a bar or to a movie, but the movies do happen 10 times more than bars do. We also play a lot of video games, so there's not the typical sex, drugs, and rock and roll happening on our tours. Brad Dilson. We're not straight edge per se. I had friends who were straight edge in high school. I know what that's about, but we're just regular guys who try to avoid the cliches of being on the road. When we were in high school, I would always get together with my friends and go over to Mike's house and make music. Same when I started college. We'd get together and have band practice instead of going drinking or going to parties. Maybe we're just nerdy music guys. If we had a day off and we were given a choice between getting drunk and screwing around versus sitting in the back of our bus and writing songs, we'll write the song. Which is no doubt why you had, according to one report, more than 50 songs for this album. I think it was more like 80 or 90. There was possibly that many seeds for songs, because that's the way we write. I'll come up with the guitar part, or Mike will come up with a beat, and we'll just keep adding to it. Songs often get completely rewritten 4 or more times. Other songs fall by the wayside. But the songs we ended up with all have something in common in that they work together as an album. That was our goal in writing Meteora and past albums as well. I think a lot of times artists would just try to write a hit song or two, and the record company says, now just spit out some filler for the rest of the album. But we approach every second of the album with equal sincerity, thinking that it has equal importance. So you started writing Meteora on the road in your mobile studio. Yeah, we started in the back of our bus on Ozfest. We have a Pro Tools rig back there, which really just gave us an opportunity to put down sounds or little ideals that we had. We weren't in the intensive position of trying to hash out songs. It was more just fun for us so that we didn't lose anything that we would come up with. Then, when we finished touring in March of 2000, we basically moved that studio into Mike's apartment and continued the process. We took a little break to do reanimation and went back to Meteora. We really jumped into it, trying to get into the studio with our producer, Don Gilmore, right away. Do you think that reanimation project pushed you into a more electronic direction? I think it pushed us to think outside the box more. We got to work with an eclectic group of remixers and artists, all of whom we admire, from Mikey P to Xeon I, and it was great to see how these people work, which in some cases was really different than anything we'd ever done. Reanimation was also the first opportunity that Phoenix and I had to work with live strings and piano. So taking that experience into Meteora has been a lot of fun. Once you get comfortable with that kind of thinking, it's no big deal to say, oh, let's throw some strings on this track, which is what we did with Breaking the Habit and Faint. Phoenix played all the string parts on Reanimation, but for Meteora, we brought in a 10-piece orchestra. They actually tripled their parts so it sounded like 30 players. Breaking the Habit was originally just an instrumental interlude called Drawing that Mike had. But we decided to make a song out of it. Of all the songs on the album, it's the one I'm the most proud of. I think it's the best song we've ever written. It sounds totally foreign to anything we've ever done, but at the same time, it's Linkin Park. It makes me want to cry when I listen to it. It's the first song we finished vocals on. When I heard it all finished, I said, okay, this is a good sign. Mike had some lyrical ideals he'd been working on for a long time, but he never found the right place for them until that song came along. For 5 years, I've been trying to write a song about self doubt, having things that you don't like about yourself and what you do, and finding a way out of that. I probably tried 20 times, but it always just sounded cheesy. It just wouldn't happen. But when I tried it this time, it just fell on the page. Easier to Run seems to be about life's regrets or wishing you could go back and redo things. Kind of. But it's also about when you're having problems, just getting up in the morning can be so awful if you've got something bad going on that you dread facing that day. You get the feeling that it would be so much simpler just to avoid it, and the song is dealing with that feeling. And the guilt that would be there if you did actually do that. I know that sounds really broad, but Chester and I have completely different life stories. So when we get together to write a song, we usually find some raw emotion that we both can relate to. Then we'll each interpret that emotion according to our own life experiences and make the song one story. Who's the closet Depeche Mode fan in the band? I don't think we have any closet Depeche Mode fans. We're way out of the closet with our love for Depeche Mode. Brad got me into Depeche Mode when we first started the band. The fact that I'm really into samples is what drew me in, because Depeche Mode uses samples so brilliantly, and Brad's into their song structures, and Chester loves their lyrics, so we all love it for different reasons. I listen to a lot of things. I really like Depeche Mode and you too. I just love the edge in his guitar playing. I also listen to a lot of hip hop stuff that doesn't have any guitar on it. I guess some of that just comes from growing up in Southern California in the era when K-Rock played Depeche Mode all day long. There are so many styles of music that are so easily accessible out here in LA. You've got a lot of hip hop and a lot of rock. You've got tons of industrial, goth, electronic, DJ, and rave culture. All of these things just come together to make a great scene for music. It can be very confusing because there's so much stuff, but it's just really natural for us to be writing a song in one style and then just ripping it up and trying something in another genre entirely. Everyone is saying, oh, rap metal has peaked now. It's over. How does that make you feel? It's obvious that we have rapping and heavy guitars in our music, but if there was some way to avoid being associated with rap metal, we'd like that. Because we don't consider ourselves belonging to any genre, really. We just want to write good songs. I think it's easy to say that a certain style of music is either in or passe. You can say whatever you want in terms of trends, but one trend that has never gone away is great songs. Great songs are going to be the future. That's my prediction. Sure, the style you're writing in is important, but the substance of the song is what really matters. You're more about songs than other bands that are considered rap metal or new metal. Here's the thing about our song structures. As you listen to different genres, you'll always see different approaches to songwriting. I would call it a common mistake to use just your own genre as your only example of how to put a song together. Say you want to do a metal song with 4 verses, but all the metal bands you listen to have just 2 verses. Well, maybe you should listen to hip hop because they will put together songs with 4 or more verses. If you want to try different things, you've got to listen to other people who have done it before and see if they were successful or not. Otherwise, you'll keep reinventing the wheel every time you go into what, for you, is uncharted territory. You give yourself a larger vocabulary by absorbing a lot of different styles. I think so. I went to school for illustration, and at Art Center, we studied a lot of paintings that I wasn't into. A lot of different styles of art that I was just not interested in, like the surrealist stuff. I didn't love it. It didn't seem like it applied to me. But then I found out that they were doing certain things that were very important for that time. And I found out ways that those things applied to what I was doing at the moment. So I think for Joe and me, because we went to the same school, that was our first lesson in not reinventing the wheel. You've got to know your history in order to be able to make truly innovative work. There's a high level of craftsmanship in your music. Things are worked on very carefully. Thank you. Yeah, we're kind of meticulous about those details. My ideal of fun, as perverted as this may sound, is to take a song that's somewhat rough around the edges and give it a form that's compelling. I see the benefits in a lot of more lo-fi style bands. I like listening to that stuff. Like the way Rage Against the Machine was doing albums when they came out with Evil Empire and The Battle for Los Angeles. I thought those were really raw and dirty sounding, but they were so strong and powerful. That's their style. We have our own style. As the band's Pro Tools guy, how do you interact with Brad in putting his guitar tracks together? Normally, we write straight into the computer. We don't jam our parts. Brad, like the rest of the guys, likes to come up with many different ideas as possible and then pick the best ones. When you're working in a digital environment, you have to have so much more flexibility as opposed to when you're jamming out in a room and somebody wants to make a change, but nobody else wants to go along with it because they just learned their part. This really affords us the ability to look unemotionally at our songs to try to make them as succinct and effectively constructed as possible. Mentally, Brad doesn't get attached to any one guitar part just because he's played it longer than some other ideal. With Pro Tools, he listens to them all fresh and says, number 5 is the one that I like, and we put that into place. So songs may transform radically while you're writing as a result of being able to manipulate things in Pro Tools. Definitely. Faint is one that I started with guitar, and I originally thought it was going to be a half tempo song, like a 70 BPM, bop your head kind of thing. And Mike actually double timed it to 140 BPM. At first, I was kind of like, are you sure? That's not what I intended, but he said, trust me, and he was right. It's got a really cool beat at the beginning, it's digitally manipulated. That's one of the earliest song ideals on the album. It's one of the few songs from the beginning of the writing process on the bus that made it onto the album. Everything is done in Pro Tools? Pretty much, we wrote all the music in Pro Tools, then Rob, Phoenix, and I spent a few weeks practicing live once the songs were written, doing live pre production. Simplifying the drum patterns, really just trying to get Rob prepared to go in and track, cause he tracks first. But he tracks to Pro Tools rather than tape, right? Right. Clearly, the trend is moving away from analog tape and toward Pro Tools. But there has been a fear in the past years that tape might have a certain warmth that digital environment doesn't. So even when people were tracking vocals and guitars straight into Pro Tools, they'd still track drums and bass onto tape and then dump them into the computer. But the question is, if everything's going to go into the computer and eventually get burnt onto a CD, does it matter if you go to tape? And this time around, our producer basically decided it doesn't matter. So we recorded everything straight into Pro Tools. The whole nonsense of tape is so antiquated in terms of ease of use. It's so much more enjoyable to work right on Pro Tools. And actually, we're using Pro Tools HD, which has even higher resolution. The funny thing is that you lose some of that when the record company presses the CD because the CD has lower quality than Pro Tools HD. But clearly, people want to use the best available form of technology. How do you achieve such a big guitar sound? I pretty much re record all the guitar parts from the song demo using a lot of layering of different guitars and amps. Dawn and I worked together on that, basically using different combinations of Mesa and Marshall amps with different speaker cabinets and mic placements. Some songs will have as many as 6 tracks of guitar. I'll create a basic sound using various amps, and let's say my PRS guitar, I'll do 2 tracks left and right with that sound, and then I'll do another stereo layer on top of that. And then I'll add another 2 tracks of octave guitar on top of that. And that creates that full spectrum, that stereo effect that really plays well on headphones and on a car stereo. Overdubbing those parts as many as 6 times, is it hard to get them really tight? Yes, I literally have to retune after every take. I probably spent 3 quarters of my time in the studio tuning my guitar and a quarter of that time playing my instrument. Sometimes you might tune an open string and it's dead on, but when you fret it, it might go sharp. It's a crazy process. Don't Stay on the new album has a particularly big bottomed guitar sound. On Don't Stay, I use a really cool Ibanez RG model that has an extended scale. And I actually did a drop B tuning on that, low to high, B, F sharp, B, E, G sharp, C sharp, as opposed to drop C sharp tuning. I usually use low to high, C sharp, G sharp, C sharp, F sharp, A sharp, D sharp. I was able to do that because the longer scale allows for thicker strings. He's essentially talking about a baritone guitar. What other guitars are important for getting your sound? I did a lot with custom PRS that I have, which Mike helped me design. It's a set neck guitar, a 24 fret guitar. It's generally in that drop C sharp tuning I mentioned. I like that because I can just bar all the chords and add ninths and other colors with my pinky. And instead of playing a 7 string, I'm using an Ibanez Prestige that's standard 440. But I'm leaving the high E string off and starting with a low B instead. So it's BEADGB, and the first single, Somewhere I Belong, uses that tuning, only down a half step. So the low string is a B sharp. So I'm kind of all over the place with tunings. I guess it depends on however the guitar was tuned when we first came up with the ideal. And you said you put those guitars through a combination of Mesas and Marshalls? Yeah, Don has some vintage hot rodded Marshalls, which I combined with my Mesa dual rectifiers. Mesa came out with a triple rectifier amp, but the one I tried I didn't like nearly as much as my dual rectifiers. And I heard they're discontinuing the dual, so I started stockpiling them. So if you can't find one, that's because I have them all. Since you're working in Pro Tools, do you ever use Amp Farm or any other amp modeling plugins? I mainly use Amp Farm for writing and demo sounds, and I love it. Some of our Amp Farm demo sounds are better than most finished records, but a lot of that ends up being replaced with real amp tracks. But for a lot of that clean stuff or extra layers I like Mike to experiment with plugins as much as possible. And we used plugins that weren't made for guitars. Crazy effed up plugins that don't sound like anything you've heard before. Then I worry about replicating it live afterward. Mike always said, if I do this, how are we ever going to play it live? But I tell him, don't worry about it. I'll figure it out. I want to do what's best for the record. I'd rather use plugins than the latest effects boxes because every guitarist has done those and they all sound the same. The plugins add a lot of color. A lot of groups are just guitar, bass, and drums. But when you do that, you're so limited sonically. That's been around forever. We aren't bogged down in that business because we're borrowing from the spirit of different genres. There's an experimentation and a freedom that goes with that as to what you can try sonically. I like some of your filter moves, Mike, like on the drum sounds in session. Yeah, those are rather fun. You can automate all your effects in Pro Tools. Do you use a real time control surface? No, I don't. See, I used to do graphics and illustration, and a lot of visual editing programs like Photoshop and Illustrator have much the same feel as the digital audio editing programs like Pro Tools. So I can just draw a nice little curve and the filter will sweep down on that curve. It's the same with volumes and panning and everything. I do things visually a lot. That's why I chose to work with the pencil tools and stuff like that rather than with a real time controller like Pro Controller. The intro guitar on Figure 9 sounds like it might have been processed through some non guitar plugins. No, that's a tapping figure. I guess that's a subtle nod to my 80s roots. So if anyone says I'm not a virtuoso player, I refer them to my tapping riff, and I play it through an octave down pedal that Don had. You can't create that without some kind of effect. Is that backward guitar on the intro to Somewhere I Belong? Yeah, it's actually an ideal that Chester had on acoustic guitar. He played it to Mike. Mike said, "That's great." He recorded it into Pro Tools and then put it backward, sampled it and chopped it up, and that became the beginning of the song. I think when you hear that, it keeps your attention. It has such a unique personality to it that you can identify it right away and say, okay, that's Linkin Park. End.